It's something that will be available. It says up here, Carrie needs $45 to buy her mother a birthday present. She has saved 22% of that amount so far. How much more does she need? It's not asking what is 22%. It's saying how much more does she need after you figure out what 22% is. So it's taking a step. You know, we've talked a little bit about if we look at our NWEA charts over here, our MAP scores. Say the difference between a 230 to 240. It's just finding percent of a number. When we get into the 240s and 250s, it's analyzing a percent of number problem and solving from there. So this is the type of question on our MAP test that we want to get if we want to be in the high 240s, 250s. Kind of thing that we need to know how to do. First thing we need to make sure is we understand what percent of a number is, and that's the first part. To solve this one, we have to figure out what is 22% of 45. That's one way to do it. So when we look at that, we can create a number line, and the number line will help us to estimate about where our answer is and to estimate about how much we need. Our goal is to get to $45. We need to figure out what's 22%. And then we need to figure out how much more do we need to save to get this present. So what's the halfway point between 0 and 45? 22 and a half. $22.50. Okay? And what does that represent for a percent for us? It's 50% because $45 is 100%. So now we can go down and find the halfway point between 22.5 and 0, or $22.50 and 0. That halfway point is 25, because halfway between 0 and 50 is 25%. What would that number be? $11.25. Now, what we found was 25%. It's our goal to find 22%. If we were doing lesson 6.3, we would have found about where we needed to be. Okay? Now, here's the steps that we need to take for this one. We can either go one of two ways. We've talked about finding 10% of a number. Who can remind us, how do we find 10% of a number? Yeah. So what is 10% of 45? 4.5. If 10% equals, $4.50, what would 20% be? Yeah. Yeah. It'd be 10% plus 10%, right? Or 4.5 plus 4.5. So we know that 20% is 9. Now, how do we find 1%? Yeah. Two places, right? Because we're multiplying by 1/100. We lose 2 decimal places. So now all of a sudden, instead of being $45, 10% we move to $4.50. When we go to 1%, it's just 45 cents. So if we need to find 2% to get to 22%, we just add one more 1%. Is that right? 1% plus 1%. Now, if we combine our 2% with our 20%, we have our grand total of where we need to be. we know that 22% is the same thing as $9.90. Are we done? What else do we need to do now? Yeah. Yeah. The main question is, how much more does she need? So we take the total of 45, we subtract $9.90. So I'm going to do that just right here. 45, subtract $9.90. It's $44.01, the same thing as 45. Right? So now I can do my subtracting. I have 10 cents here. 44 subtract 9 is a grand total of $35.10. Must look exactly like that. Get it right. Now, I bet many of you did it a little different way. Okay? In fact, I did it kind of the long way right there. Is that correct? If you have a calculator, it's much quicker. Can someone tell me the method, if you have a calculator, what we should do? Get that yawn out. Yes, let's get it out. 0.22. Don't say percent, because that's a different number. 22 hundredths is 22%, which is different than 22 hundredths of a percent. Okay, good. Okay? I'm going to stop right there. I can look at that and say, there's the math problem. Here's what it sounds like. 22% of 45. We have to have that down. We have to have that down. And I guarantee you punch that into your calculator. Did you get the same answer as I did? $9.90. Okay? And then we'd go back and do the exact same thing, subtract right here to figure out that total. We okay with that? Now, for you to not have to take the benchmark today, I need to see some sort of work. For you to get a 5 today on your benchmark, bare minimum, I need to see this right here, ICE, this right here, and this right here. I don't have to actually see the math. You can just punch this into your calculator. And I don't have to see any borrowing here. You could just punch this into your calculator. But I need to see what numbers you're putting in. Make sense to everybody? All right. Problem number 2. We're going to do this one a little bit quicker this time. Okay? There are 245 students in 7th grade. If 40% of them ride the bus to school, how many 7th graders do not ride the bus to school? What's the percent of kids that do not ride the bus to school? Yeah. Yeah. Instead of doing our subtracting this time, what we did is we could do the subtracting at the front. 60% do not ride the bus. So now we can just find what is 60%. What? Say again? 60% of 245. What's the decimal we need to use for 60%? Yep. Thank you. That's 60%. It's not 6%. It is 60%. That's 6/10. If we add a 0 to it, now it becomes 60/100. That's the definition of percent out of 100. Okay? We multiply that by 245. So it's slightly more than half of the population. Okay? What did we get when we took 0.6 times 245? 147 students. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay? Now, kids, we got a good video tonight that you can watch. We showed a couple different ways. On this one up here, I want you to do this really quickly just to make sure. What's the difference? How much money does she have left percentage-wise? What's the percent that she has left? Could you find 78% of 45, and would that give you your answer right away? It should be. 78% of 45 should be that $35.10. Does that make sense to everybody? So we could have done that the reverse way with number one as well. Okay? Either way, we're finding percent of a number. It's your job to determine what that percent of the number is by reading the problem. Okay?